So a new version of the pipeline is out, and there are some bug fixes in there, but there's some really cool features I definitely want to show everybody this time. Also, as a quick note, I am using the latest version of Godot, the latest version of Blender, 4.3 stable on Godot, and then Blender I'm finally using 4.2. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Technically, my add-on is a legacy add-on, but it's very easy to install on 4.2 as well. One of the nicest features that's in here now is we can do packed scenes right from the Blender file, which means we can have placeholders in Blender that represent entire packed scenes in Godot. So that's pretty cool. You can do, like right here is a character controller, and you can even have a packed scene for your environment. So this one here is a packed scene that just has a directional light and also the world environment as well. So over on the Blender side, you basically get a representation of that character model or whatever, and you get a feel for, I guess, you know, where they're going to be. You can move them around here, and if we export and then jump over to Godot, you get an immediate move of that, you know, packed scene. So that can be super useful. I can see already many different cool things you can do with that. So the other really cool thing I want to showcase right at the outset is that there is a really nice way of basically doing GeoNodes instancing to multi-meshes. What I have here is a very simple GeoNode setup. We're doing distribute points on faces, so I'm distributing a whole bunch of things from this collection, some little grass things. These are all Kenny assets, by the way, so thank you, Kenny, for publishing all these free things to use. Plants and then flowers, right? So the cool thing is you can define this collection, and then you can just, if you want there to be more grass or more plants, say, than flowers, then you can just do an Alt-D link duplicate, and it basically increases the distribution of that. We also do some random scale, some random, you know, rotation, so you can mess with all these numbers like density. If it's too dense, if you want it less dense, you can do that. But I'll show you where the real magic is. If I go to Object and then hit Apply and Make Instances Real, we actually get a whole bunch of instances of these. So what you want to do right away is you're going to move these to foliage instances just to kind of organize them a bit. And so here's all your instances. And the cool thing is that they actually reference the same mesh. So you have two ways of going about this. You can rely on Godot's batching. So if you're using forward plus, you can literally just export this as is. You don't have to do anything else at all. And we come over here. Now we get, you know, 266 objects. So the draw calls are still down, right? It's not a ton of draw calls, but it's a lot of objects to be parsing, as opposed to multi-mesh, which kind of handles it with GPU instancing. I mean, forward plus is still pretty awesome as a first pass. That's nice. But then the other issue is that you've got your scene tree like clogged up with, you know, 200 objects. So the easy way around it is we're going to use the add-on to assign a multi-mesh TRES file to the mesh. So in this case, we don't even need to look at the foliage instances. We can just go to the foliage. And since all the instances reference these meshes, we just need to apply some data here. Okay, so flowers tall, we're going to add this flower multi-mesh. I already had it set up in my path, so we just hit set path. Grass, we can do grass, set path, and then we find plant, and we'll set plant here. So that should be it. Make sure assign to mesh is on. We export to Godot, and let's see what this looks like. There you go. So we have way less objects in the scene tree, and we obviously have our multi-meshes here. So that's pretty cool, right? You can do it right from Blender. We're using GeoNodes. We're leveraging all that power. And, you know, I'm a big fan of the add-ons that we can create in Godot, but part of me also feels like, are we playing catch up, creating all of these different add-ons to try to replicate features that more or less exist in Blender and design tools that 3D artists are familiar and comfortable with using? So this character controller was from that packed scene, right, that we had created from Blender. We have this little lever over here. What you can't see right now is that there's an area 3D that once we, you know, if I press F out here, nothing happens. But if I press F in here, we get this nice little animation. We'll talk about why that level resets in a sec. And of course, when that platform is up, we can jump across here and get the key. Okay, so I'm gonna pretty much walk you through what this would look like if you were starting from scratch. I have Blender 4.2 open here, and what I've done is I've taken that whole scene, but I've stripped out all of the extra data. So these are just some models. These are actually all Kenny models, as I mentioned before. All of these models, I used Alt D when I duplicated. I did not use Shift D, so we're really getting this block dash grass. That mesh is being reused. Basically, anywhere that you can, you should be reusing meshes because GLTF is smart enough to actually batch that when you import into Godot. The first thing, obviously, we want to do is actually install the pipeline add-on, and it's pretty easy to do. So in 4.2, install from disk. And once you find it, don't install the zip file, just install the Python file directly. You will get this in the Blender Market download, and it should work right away. So once we do that, we can hit the N key, and it shows up here. So the first thing we're going to want to do is apply some collisions. One thing I will say is the assign to mesh feature can be a little tricky. If you've already duplicated your instances here, you can't actually assign it to mesh because there's a limitation with Blender. But what we can do is just shift select all of these objects and then set a box collision on them all, and do the same for these guys, set collisions. So that'll set collisions. We're still going to get mesh instancing because that's basically a separate pathway. We'll do a static on this guy, so we're also going to animate this. So we'll see how that works in a second. And we'll do just one more static here. So with a couple collisions in place, we should probably also do the floor. This one will be a tri-mesh static body. We'll do that. And we can hit display add-on data. That looks okay. So in Godot, I've just got a blank project here. We'll get this set up real quick, and then I'll go ahead and do the export. But first things first, you're going to want a folder probably for assets. We will grab the Blender pipeline. So we'll just grab this, we'll download it. Usually it takes a sec, and you shouldn't get any conflicts. I tried my best to program the add-on properly. Once that's done, you can go to project settings, import defaults, we come down to scene, and you can actually set that import script path by default. So this is a great little tip that someone gave me. I didn't even know this until recently. But if you save that and hit close, basically everything we bring in now is going to get this pipeline attached by default. Next, we want to get the export going. Basically, we're just going to find that assets folder that we created. You just need to type any name and then .gltf. So the .gltf on the end is important. It won't work without it. So let's go ahead and export. You should see this starting the post-import process, post-import complete. Once that's all done, you know that everything worked pretty well. So let's make a new scene. I will save this right away. We'll just call it level, and we'll drag in that asset. So with everything set up, you'll notice that this kind of just runs right out of the box when you have those couple of things set up. And we do have all of our collisions in here, and otherwise there's not too much going on in this scene. What I want to show you next is how this whole packed scene thing works. It's pretty cool. What we can do is we can design basically like a character body. And let's throw in a mesh. We'll do a capsule, do collision shape, and that'll also be a capsule. I will throw a script on here. I have kind of a custom script that I'm going to load in, so don't worry about that too much. It's just the default one doesn't have much. And also this left, right, forward, back, we need to map some of these actions. So we'll go to project settings, input map, and we'll do left, right, forward, back. And I'm just going to map them to W, A, S, and D. So otherwise, this is pretty good. There's a couple other things we're going to set up here in a bit. That's just for our little toy game here. But yeah, now we have this character body. What I want to do is I actually want to right click and then save branch as scene. And we can just save that as character body. So now we have this packed scene, but what we can do is we can kind of encode that scene. Let me just pull it out here so we can see it. We can encode this scene into the Blender scene. So if we come down here to the file system, we find that character body and we hit Control-Shift-C. If we come back over here, we can drop in anything, any representative mesh, or you can use an empty as well. But we'll do a mesh, maybe just a cube is okay. And scaling on the X and Y axes, we kind of want that to be kind of like this, I think. Let's take a look at our dimensions. So 2 meters, 0.5 and 0.5. We can apply scale. And all we need to do, we come down to the path setter, and we're going to set a packed scene. So this is the new option basically. Click packed scene, and then we paste that character body path and set path, and then export. So in our level, we see that second character body kind of just appear here. And what that means is we can get rid of this original character body that we used to kind of create the whole thing. But the other thing we can do is we can create a little environment node like I mentioned earlier. So let's go ahead and make a node 3D. I'm going to drop in a directional light and let's just pull it up and probably tilt it down a little bit, maybe off to the side. Let's turn on shadows. And also we can add the world environment. So if we add that world environment, we can drag it into here and then right click. We're going to save branch as scene and then we'll call this environment. So hit Control-Shift-C on there. And for the environment, I don't think we really need anything. So let's just reset that cursor to world origin and let's just add an empty. And to that empty, we can apply this packed scene, export for Godot. And you notice the environment kind of got twice as bright. Once again, that's because we have our, that node is getting loaded in twice. So our empty here actually contains the lit environment. The next thing we want to take a look at is animations. Obviously, we're going to be animating this little lever thing like you saw in the demo, and we want an animation for this thing over here. So animations have improved in 4.3, although I'm still seeing some workflow issues. It's still not perfect. We'll come down to action editor. We'll just create a new action. We'll call this one lever. And let me just keyframe. You got to press K now on 4.2 of Blender. Rotation there, and then maybe on, I don't know, 35 or so, we'll rotate along the Y and keyframe again. So here's our lever animation. That looks fine. And then this one, we're gonna do basically a lifting animation. Little problem with this, we discussed this in a previous video. This guy, display add-on data, has a static body and collision on it. Trying to animate it is not gonna work. So here's the workaround that works pretty well. We'll hit Shift S, we'll do cursor to active, and then I'll just drop in an empty here. If we shift select this to the empty and hit Control P to parent, what we can do now is we actually animate this empty. So I'll drop in a new animation here. We'll call it platform. And I will keyframe the location there, and then we'll come up to maybe here or so, and then keyframe this location. All right, so there's our platform animation. So we can see that the animations kind of play at the same time. I'm not going to get into it in this video. You can kind of alleviate this a little bit by using NLA tracks. It's not going to help us here too much though, so we'll see in a second. Let's go ahead and export. So we do get an animation player. So when this animation comes in, we do get two separate actions, which is nice, I guess, but it's actually applying all the objects to both actions. Really what we need to do for the lever, we need to remove the platform parent. And then obviously on the platform, we don't need any lever animation. But what we'll do for now is we'll leave this as is, and then at the end, as a last step, we can clean it up. So I do have some additional scripts that we're going to use, and one of them is going to be attached to this platform parent. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and create a script now, call it platform parent.gd. So we'll just create node default. Of course, now we've set it to be on that empty, but what we want to do is copy that into Blender so that every time we hit export, we get that. So we go to platform parent, Control-Shift-C, back to Blender, and then on the actual empty for this guy, we can apply a script. So we'll set that path and then hit export. So this script is not really doing much. This script is going to be responsible for the animation player, and it's going to basically say, if the player is in a position where they can toggle the lever and if that action is pressed. So that's another thing we got to do. We got to set up an action real quick. So we'll do new action. I'll just call it action, and we'll tie it to the F key. Okay. So if we're in a position where that lever can be pressed, then we can basically play the animations, and there's a little bit of logic here. It's really not a big deal. The final thing we need to kind of make this work is there needs to be an area 3D surrounding this lever so that we know when the character body is actually, can interact with that lever. The way I've scripted it, this is not necessarily a good way to do it. This is just the way I did it, is that we're going to have an area 3D sphere around that lever that the player is going to trigger, and then we're going to emit a signal. So we signal up, right, and call down. but we're going to signal up and say, once we've entered that area, the animation logic can then say, okay, you're in the area. If the action is pressed, then we can trigger the lever. First thing we want to do is that our pack scene for our character body, we're going to want to have an area 3D so that it can respond. I'm just going to copy the collision shape and just drop it right in here. Why am I doing this? I've had a lot of problems in Godot with getting character bodies and rigid bodies and area 3Ds to all signal and act nice together. My solution has been to just use area 3Ds, and that's worked so far, so I'm not necessarily changing that. So area entered, we're just going to throw it right on here, on area 3D, area entered, and there you go. And then area exited, we'll connect that one up as well. Now in the level design, we can throw the area 3D around this guy in Blender pretty easily. The way I would do that is I would go cursor active, then we'll do maybe doesn't really matter, it could be a cube, but we can do a icosphere here, and we'll set a sphere area 3D here. I don't want the mesh, and I'm gonna leave display wireframe bounds unchecked, so we'll just do that. And on the viewport display, I might just change this to wireframe. Okay, so there is an area 3D here. It is just very, very difficult to see. If I turn off the plane, you can see the area of influence around here. So we can, control that in Blender. Let's do an export. That brings back the plane, but let's hide that, and you can see that shrinks down. So then we get that area 3D. One little thing we forgot in the character controller is to actually add a camera. So that's definitely something you want to do. We're going to add a camera 3D, and we'll just pull it back, and we'll kind of have it overlooking the shoulder a little bit. So we'll hit preview. That might be okay. Another little bug here is that the code was looking for area 3D sphere. So if you remember me mentioning a second ago why this might not be a good idea, well, I'm dependent on the actual name of that area 3D. So maybe not a good idea. You probably want explicit node paths or signals, right? That kind of thing. So let's try this one more time, and we should be able to play. So that animation plays and this animation plays. So you may be wondering, why does the lever flick back? The reason the lever flicks back is because of that animation player. So let's fix this quickly. If you come in here, animations manage, I forget which one it is, but we'll do make unique. Okay, so once you make unique, we can actually delete these tracks from the other ones. So just to go over that one more time, the proper way to fix this is for this icosphere, change this name to sphere here, and then when we hit export, the area 3D underscore sphere is going to be the automatic naming that's going to get. So with this little script that I've created here on the character body, this part of it should work. Obviously, every time you hit export, you have to redo this animation process. This is a pain, and I am looking for feedback. If anyone has any ideas on how to improve this workflow, I'm definitely open to that. There is another way where, I'll show you this quickly. I did it in a previous video a couple times now, I think. But when you go to advanced on the GLTF import, on your animation player, you can actually, you can do save to file and then keep custom track. And if you do that, it basically imports it as a local resource, which you can then edit. I don't know why that's not the default behavior. It's really, really clunky to work with. But in any case, that should be done if we run it now. If we come up here and hit F, we get that animation, and the two things kind of stay where they are. I think the way I've programmed it is if this comes back, that still stays up. So now we should be able to probably hop across. And if not, we know how to tweak it. But this controller does not feel good. So I would not use this as a controller. This video is probably not going to be long enough to go super in deep on it, but this whole idea that we can tie geometry nodes in Blender to a multi-mesh instance or several multi-mesh instances in Godot. It's a super powerful feature. I've enjoyed playing around with it so far. I think it could be very useful for scattering objects for sure. So let's go ahead and find the GeoNodes editor. Basically, here's your group input, your group output. And what I did is this is actually on the plane. right? So we started with the plane. I duplicated that back plane here, that green plane, and then we have this plane that's for geonodes. And all you do is you use this distribute points on faces. We're gonna actually tie it to a collection. So this foliage collection here has a bunch of different pieces of foliage in it. And then we can distribute it on those points. Click all these checkboxes here, separate children, reset children, pick instance, and then you can randomize the rotation and scale. And really what you can do is just play with the numbers, right? Play with these are the rotations, min and max. So we kind of get some, rotations there. Probably these 3 flowers should be separate objects if you really wanted to have some, kind of thing going on there. But even when you play with this, a great thing about geonodes, it kind of gives you an idea, like in a shader, right? In a vertex shader, how could you animate these things to kind of make them look like they're swaying in the wind? Or what kind of scale ranges look good for the different pieces. So we'll just go with this for now. And I've already created this foliage instances collection, so hopefully you can see where I'm going with that. But we have this geonodes. If you go to object, apply, and then make instances real, you literally get objects for every single one of those instances. So we move that to foliage instances. And, I've been chatting with people on forums and different things, and people don't seem to know why we want to do this for a game engine. The reason you want to do this for a game engine is that we are basically getting all of the transforms of all of these objects. So whether you want to do this as, batched drawing in forward plus renderer, or if you want to do it as a multi-mesh instance, we're basically exposing all of these transforms, right? And they all use the same mesh data. So it all works out nicely. Under foliage, you see we have one of each. So that means we get an equal distribution of each of those. If I want more grass, for instance, you just hit Control D a couple of times, or Alt D, sorry. And you can see that the proportion of grass is higher because the geonodes is sampling from this little collection to find the objects. So with the add-on, what we can do to actually set this up is under grass, what I'll do is I'll just clear add-on data for these 3 to just show you where it gets set. But let's start with the grass, and assign to mesh is on, go to path setter, and what we're gonna do is set multi-mesh path. And my paths aren't in here, so you can copy really any path from Godot, it doesn't really matter. This workflow probably could be improved, but this works for now. But if we do grass.tres and hit set, and then we'll do the same thing here. We'll do flowers.tres and then set, and then plant, we'll do plant.tres. So what this is doing, it's defining a place in memory, in your file system to actually save that multi-mesh. Okay, so those multi-meshes are set. We got to re-instance our geonodes again. So let's do that. Object, apply, make instances real. Then we just move them to our foliage. And don't forget to hide your geonodes as well. You don't want that, as well as your foliage in your final render, let's say. And then when you hit export, we do get all these multi-mesh in here. So you can pretty quickly see if we go to perspective and then view information, draw calls 13, the object count is still really low. So this is quite an efficient way to render all these things and to get that basically geometry nodes functionality. So I think it looks pretty good. And we can see this is what the final end scene looks like, right? So here's our little platforms with our collisions, and can't quite make it over here, but if we hop over here and press F, we should be able to jump up there now. Once again, that animation workflow, I'm really open to discussing with people, what the best solution is, because if you want a pipeline from Blender to Godot, it's a pain point right now. And it doesn't really truly enable iteration from the Blender side, because you keep needing to tweak things for those animations to work. So yeah, I'd love to see how you're using this stuff. Please let me know in the comments. And as always, thank you for watching.